Welcome back, students. In this lecture, we're going to explore another option for hosting your PostGIS database on a remote server. We've been talking about using a web hosting service, and at some point I'm going to put up a lecture about hosting PostGIS on the Amazon cloud. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about hosting your PostGIS database through a company called AcuGIS. And to me, AcuGIS seems like it doesn't really fit either one of those descriptions. It can be a web hosting service. You can definitely host a web page on there, but its focus really seems to be on GIS. And they call themselves a cloud platform, even though they charge you so much per month or so much per year like a web hosting service does, where most cloud platforms will charge you by the amount that you use. That's because cloud platforms will automatically allocate more resources to you if you get a lot of demand on your server. So to be honest, I'm not really sure whether you would classify this as a web hosting platform or a cloud platform, but let's go take a look and see what we can do in AcuGIS. So I'm just going to go to the website, acugis.com. And the one thing that you'll see is that it's really focused on GIS hosting, whereas A2 hosting is really a web hosting platform. And if your reason for having a PostGIS database is for a web mapping application, you might want to consider A2 hosting just because they seem like they have more options available and you might be able to get some of the functionality for a little bit cheaper or get a little bit better performance for the same price. But if your focus is really on GIS and you want to be able to access that data through a GIS client application like QGIS or ArcGIS, or if you think you're going to end up wanting to implement a GeoServer instance to serve your data to other people, or a GeoNode to set up your own spatial data infrastructure, kind of like ArcGIS Online, you can allow other people to access your data or create their own maps with your data, etc. Then AcuGIS has solutions for that as well. But we're going to stick with PostGIS right now, so I'm going to click on PostGIS. It'll give you some information on hosting plans that are available, and they start at about $10 a month or $100 annually, which works out to about $8.50 a month. And as far as I can tell, that's a straight up price that you pay for the first year, the second year, etc. And remember, with A2 hosting, that discount was only applied to your first payment. So if you only paid for 1 month, it only got applied to the first month. If you pay for a year, it only gets applied to the first year. And then the price goes up. So remember that when you're comparing prices. I'm actually going to start up AcuGIS hosting for a project that I've started. And I'm going to pay for a year, just so I can save a little bit of money. And one thing you want to notice is that you have your choice between PostgreSQL 9 or 10. And A2 hosting didn't have version 10 up yet. And they also have access to PostGIS 2.4. So they have the latest versions of PostgreSQL and PostGIS, just like we've been using in the class. And they also have access to PG routing and point cloud, which is another extension for PostGIS that allows you to work with LiDAR type data. And they have right in their control panel, they have the shape to PGSQL GUI and the raster to PGSQL GUI. And that means that you can load shape files right into the PostGIS instance on your remote server. And that could really be handy in a lot of situations. They also have some GIS specific software such as Ogre to Ogre for loading different types of vector data right into PostGIS, and GDAL for working with raster data. So there's a lot of GIS-specific software that comes along. And then you have a lot of other stuff. Most of this is available on just about any web hosting service. One thing I did notice I don't often see, although I think they are available on most web hosting services, is that there's Python available on the server. So if you want to write server-side web applications with Python, maybe using GeoDjango or some other Python-based web framework, we have that available as well. So I'm just going to click Order Now. I'm not sure why I have to do this again, but it asked me to pick the plan again, so I'll click Order Now a second time. And the domain that I'm going to choose is QuarimaGeo. I'm going to make sure that I spell it exactly right this time. I think I did. I'll check it. And it says it's available. It's been added to my cart. It's going to cost me $12.50 a year, which is a little bit cheaper. I think A2 hosting wanted $15 per year. And then I'll click Continue. It's going to ask me to configure some options. I'll choose the billing cycle as annually, hosting location. I'm going to keep it in the United States. I'm not going to get a SSL certificate right now or Java server. Then I'm going to make sure that I get PostgreSQL 10 as a version and PostGIS version 2.4. And I'm not going to get any one of these right now. I can always add them later on at some other point. So I'll click Continue. I'm going to click DNS Management and Email Forwarding and Continue. And then I'll go to the checkout and pay the total price $112.50. And I'll go ahead and pick a password. And then I'm going to pay with PayPal. Click that I've read and agreed and complete my order. And everything worked okay, I believe, so I'm going to go ahead and give them 5 stars. So it gives me a confirmation number, and then I'm going to click Continue to Client Area. Now at this point, it takes a couple hours for everything to get set up on their servers. It took about 3 hours for me, and then I got an email. Actually, I got 3 or 4 emails from them, and those emails included all the information about how to log in and what your host name is, your username and password, and all that kind of stuff. So after you get those emails, you should be all good to go. And so what I'm going to do next is log into the AcuGIS cPanel portal. We'll create a new database. We'll install PostGIS on that database, and then we'll load up the data that we've been working on in this class. And we already created that SQL export file in the last lecture, so we'll just use that same file and load it up. And then we'll see how we can access that data from pgadmin 4 and also from QGIS. So there's a number of different ways to get to cPanel. I'm just going to show you one, and I would recommend that once you get there that you create a bookmark to it. That'll make things a lot easier. But I'm just going to start from the basics and go straight to the AcuGIS COM. And then I'll click on Client Login, enter my email address and password from the email that they sent me. And then I can go to Services, My Services, View Details, and then down at the bottom there's a button to log into cPanel. And we've seen this before on the A2 hosting site. It's a little bit different on AcuGIS. For instance, they have the MySQL databases and the PostgreSQL tools in separate divisions. If you remember, I installed version 10, and when I go to PHP pgadmin, it won't let me connect. Actually, it lets me connect, but it tells me the version of PostgreSQL is not supported. So we can't use PHP pgadmin on AcuGIS at this point. Maybe they'll upgrade this at some point, but that's okay because they have remote access enabled by default, and we can access it directly through pgadmin 4. And that's great because that's what we're used to working with, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is set up a PostgreSQL database, and that's very easy. I'm going to call this one TestGIS. I'll click Create Database and then go back. And now we see 2 databases in here. This one is one that I played around with a little bit before. And then I'm going to add a new user. We'll call it admin. And I'll give it a password and create the user. And I should mention that the super user for your database is the same username and password that you were given to log in. And so this user that we're creating is another user that can have different privileges, just like we talked about previously in the course. And then I have to add the user that I created to the database. So query_maj admin, but the database is going to be TestGIS. So I'll click Add. So now I have 2 users down here. And if we look at current databases, we'll see the names of the users that are allowed in that database. The one that I created previously for the other database, and then this admin for the database that we just now created. So we've got a database, we've got some users. I'm going to go back to cPanel, and then a little bit below the PostgreSQL tools, we have some GIS tools. And so the first thing we're going to do is PostGIS, and you'll see PostGIS was installed on this test that I did before. It was not installed on TestGIS. And all I have to do to install it is just click this install. And now it says PostGIS installed. So we should be good to go there. Also under these GIS tools, you can install other extensions like PG routing or the point cloud extension for PostGIS. And something that's very cool is that you can use this to upload data from shapefiles directly into PostGIS. You don't have to do it on your local server and then transfer the table over through a SQL statement like you would have to do in a normal web hosting service that doesn't have these GIS tools. So AcuGIS makes everything just a little bit nicer. It also has a interface for raster to PGSQL. And that's pretty cool. You can load rasters in this way as well. And you don't even have to do it through a command line. But we already have a SQL file that contains the entire database that we've been working in. So I'm going to start up pgadmin 4, and I'll show you how we can connect to this database on AcuGIS and load the data that we exported from localhost. So I'm going to expand our server tab. See, we have our connection to localhost here. This is a connection to a different website that I maintain. So to create a connection to AcuGIS, I'm going to right-click on Servers, go to Create Server. The name is going to be AcuGIS, and maybe I'll put the name of the database in there too, just in case we ever end up with a different database. Actually, it doesn't matter, because this is connecting to the server. It's not specific to a certain database. So then under Connection, I'm going to put in the host, and that's just going to be my domain that we created, karimageo.com. And then the username could be either the user that we created and the password for him, or it could be the super user from the login information that AcuGIS sent you in the email. So I'm going to go with the super user, and I'll just paste in the password from that email. I click Save Password so I don't have to use that all the time. And then I'll click Save. And there I see we have it. It created a server. And I can go down. If I look at the login group roles, we have the users that I created, and this actually shows all of the users that have access to this database, and it'll show us all the databases as well. And even though we can see it here in pgadmin 4, that's a little disconcerting. We can't actually do anything. We can't even see the other people's data, and they couldn't see ours either. So it is secure. I'm going to come down to my Karimageo test GIS and expand that, and come down to schemas, and we'll see they have some other schemas in here that we haven't seen. They have the topology schema and also some schemas that are specific for working with tiger data from the US Census. And these are extensions from PostGIS that I guess get installed automatically. At some point I'm going to add a lecture to this class about topology, but we haven't gotten there yet. So we're going to look in the public schema, and under tables we see we have this spatial reference system. And if I expand functions, we see that we have all of the PostGIS functions in here, so we can tell that we have PostGIS installed. So that's a good thing. Then so to load our data, I'm just going to open a query editor window. And I don't think I've talked about this much previously in the course, but any SQL that you write in this window, you can save to a file and then reload it. Now we already have a SQL file that contains all the data that we have. We created that in the last lecture. That was called sdb_public.sql. And so when I load that, I see the same SQL statement that creates our entire database. All our domains, our custom functions, our tables, and then actually loads data into the table with these insert statements. So all I have to do is execute this now that I've got it loaded. It's going to recreate our entire database. And there we have it. Query returned successfully, so there were no errors at all. I'm going to refresh public, and we can see that we have all of our tables. We've got the custom domains that we created, and we've even got the sequences. So I'm not sure what the problem was with the A2 hosting. I'm kind of guessing that it was because that was an older version of PostGIS in PostgreSQL, and it wasn't the same version that we've been using in this course, but we are using version 10 in AcuGIS. So everything seems to be working a little bit smoother in AcuGIS. And just to prove that all the data is there, I'm going to clear this window, and then we can just enter a SQL statement, select everything from Raptor Nest, and execute, and there it is. So I'm going to exit pgadmin 4. We've got all our data loaded up in the database. Very simple. I'm going to do one more thing yet, and I'm going to load up QGIS, and we'll display this data in QGIS. And this is something that's also really nice about AcuGIS, is that this remote access is enabled by default. You don't have to go ask them to do it or anything like that. So in QGIS, I can just come down here to PostGIS. I'm going to right-click on here and add a new connection. And the connection is going to be AcuGIS. And here we do actually log into a specific database, so I'll include the name of that database just in case we add some additional databases at some point. The host, again, is going to be the URL that I signed up for. And the database is Corima TestGIS. And then again, we could use either a user that we created that has restricted permissions or the super user. I'm going to stick with the super user this time. And if I test connection, it says it couldn't connect. And I see what the problem is. I actually need to put in the correct host. It's Corima Geo. So I'll test it again. It says the connection was successful. That's good. I'm going to make sure I click that we also want to list tables with no geometry and only look in the public schema. And then I'll click OK. And there we have the connection. So then under the public schema, I can see all my tables. I'm just going to bring in the eagle nests and the burrowing owl habitat. And I'll drag this down. And there we see it's drawing the eagle nest and the burrowing owl habitat. My internet connection right now is having problems. It's really slow. So the speed right now is not very impressive. And that's something that there's really no getting around. When you're working with a remote database, you're pulling data over the internet. And so the performance is only going to be as good as your internet speed. However, it does do much better for smaller areas. And there's a couple ways that we can kind of mitigate this and deal with some of these performance issues. But right now I just wanted to show that it is possible to come in here and edit this data. So if I go to burrowing owl habitat and click my pencil to turn editing on, and then I'll go to my node tool. And see, I can edit this just like any other polygon in QGIS. And I can save my edits. And just to prove that that really did actually save it to a PostGIS database, I'm going to remove this and then I'll go back and bring it back in from the server. And there it is. So this lecture is getting a little bit long. I'm going to stop it here. I'll come back with another lecture very shortly dealing with some ways you can help mitigate internet speeds when you're dealing with pulling large amounts of GIS data over an internet connection. Thanks for listening. This was just one lecture in an entire course on spatial databases focused on PostGIS and QGIS. And this course is available now on udemy.com. It has more than 70 lectures and 11 hours of content. And I'm adding more content all the time. And you can get it now for only $20 with the coupon code COURSE5. And if you're interested, you're also welcome to check out my other courses on WebGIS and QGIS. And you can get more information on those at the following location. Or you can just Google Geospatial Brainstorming Courses, and it should take you right to the site.